So you're starting a new business. What is the first thing that you need to think about when you set up your entity? What kind of entity should I set up? So today we're going to talk about that very thing. So we'll see you in just a minute. We'll talk about business structure. Welcome to the Heart and Mind of Business. I am Clara Rose.
And I'm Debbie Clement-Large, and we are really excited to have you here with us, to be joining us. You're setting off on a new adventure, and that is always an exciting time. I love adventures. Do you, Clara?
I do, and I totally love the new first beginning stages of a business. I don't know why, but it literally has been the thing that I've done for over 20 years, helping people start businesses, because I just love that, taking it from idea, concept to creation. And this, I do the same thing in books. I love, let's take your concept for a book and let's create something out of it. So I just love that process. And business is no different for me. And that's what we're here to talk about today, getting started on your business. So what kind of entity did you set up?
I just set up as a sole trader.
Sole trader?
Yeah.
So that's
me.
what you guys call it, is sole trader.
Yeah.
So if you're in the US, it's a sole proprietor.
Right.
Same thing. And it depends on who you are, the type of business that you're going to be, the type of entity that you really need to be. So a lot of people can get away, especially in the service-based industry, with just being a sole trader or a sole proprietor. And really early on, I think my very first business, when I was like 18, I mean, it's a long, long time ago, I was a sole proprietor. I didn't have a need for anything outside of that. And quite frankly, I was young and didn't have a clue. Right. My father had been self-employed, so I understood the self-employed thing, but I didn't know much about the structure of a business. So it wasn't until many years later that I've had, numerous businesses over the years, where I started to learn about the different types of entities that you could have beyond just a sole proprietor or sole trader, that offered you more protection from liability, which is kind of what it boils down to. So let's talk about the different kinds of structures that you can be. So of course you can be a sole trade or sole proprietor. What that really just means is you're acting on your own behalf to do your business. Right. So anything that goes wrong, any liability that comes from it, is yours solely. It's attached usually to your social security number or whatever. I don't know if you guys have social security numbers that you use.
National insurance numbers.
Okay, so same kind of idea. So there's a number that's attached to you personally. So any debt, any liability, all of those things are attached to you personally.
Yeah.
So if you are just a small service-based person, your liability is relatively small anyway, so that might be a good fit for you. There's much less regulation than if you were an actual corporation. Okay.
Yes.
Now,
that's the same here. And actually, if you've got good insurance, then that should cover anything else. And if you're not borrowing money.
Right. Much more difficult to borrow money as a sole trader or sole proprietor than if you're a corporation. Okay, so what is a corporation? It really just is an entity that you create outside of yourself, where the sole trader or proprietor, it's about them and their number, right? That attaches the debt or liability to them. A corporation is its own entity that is outside of you, the individual. So it gets its own identification numbers, right? It's so any debt or liability connects or attaches to that corporation. So if somebody's going to sue, which we don't like to talk about such things, but they happen sometimes, right? Or there's debt, it belongs to the corporation. So depending on what you're selling, what your service is, what your product is. For some people, it makes more sense to have that corporate veil that protects or shields the person that owns the corporation. So for us, it's obvious that we need to be a corporation for us personally in our lives. We own a number of businesses and they all are the same kind of corporation, but there are a few out there. So you could be an LLC, which is a limited liability company. I don't know if you have them also in the UK. Okay. So it just limits the amount of liability that is attached to you as a person, right? It's not as heavy of a corporate veil. It's not as much protection, perhaps, as a regular corporation. So there's some protection there. Of course, I'm not an accountant and I'm not an attorney. So this is just my own life experience where I'm telling you, here's the things that I've learned from being in business for myself since I was 18 years old. And I, am well beyond those years now. So for a really long time, I've been in business for myself. And these are some of the things that I have learned. Of course, before you set something up, I'm always going to recommend that you talk to an accountant and an attorney about the structure that you want to set up. You don't need to hire somebody and pay buku bucks to have them do it for you, but you still need to get some good, solid advice from professionals that can guide you. That said, you can have a basic understanding, like I do, of the different structures and what they mean and what they do. So there's the LLC, limited liability company or corporation, and then there's a standard corporation. And the standard corporation is a complete entity unto itself, in that you could buy that, you could sell that, you could bring in new partners can leave. It's its own complete entity. You, as an owner of that corporation, literally take a paycheck from that corp. You are an employee of that corporation. It offers you the most protection against, because you aren't the corporation, right? You're just an individual who gets a paycheck. You own the corporation. Okay, and then what we do is S corporations. So an S corporation, which my understanding is that you can designate some LLCs as an S status as well. We always just do a standard S corporation. We set up a corporation and then we designate it through the IRS as an S corporation. And that means that the net profit passes from the corporation to you, the individual, and then you pay taxes on the net profit at the lower personal rate. So if there is more than one person that owns the S corporation, then the corporation takes all the debt, all the liability, and then passes through the net profit to each of the owners, depending on the amount of ownership they have of that corporation. And then those people pay tax rates much lower than that large corporation, right? Because it's at that lower personal tax level. So there's a lot of benefit to having an S corporation because of that. Those are just the different kinds of structures that you can set your entity up. And that's just a basic understanding of how they work. We have always used S corporations, well, since 94 or so, when we had an accountant that educated us and said, here's your options, here's how each of them differ, and here, so then we could make a decision for ourselves. If we wanted to be a standard corporation, you get double taxed. The corporation is taxed, and then the money passes through, and you, the person, are taxed. So as long as you stay under, 100 shares, right? You stay as a medium to small size, or probably small size business. It doesn't make sense, in my way of thinking, to have a standard corporation. But there you have it. There's the basics. Know what you want to start your company out as in the beginning. Do your due diligence, do your research, talk to the accountant, talk to an attorney, a business accountant, and just get educated. And then once you've got all of the choices in front of you, make the good decision for you and set your company up right from the get-go. It's much more difficult to change things after the fact. It can be done, but it's going to take money. So figure it out up front, get educated, and then make a good decision. Start out right. There's my advice for the day.
Yeah, and that is good advice. And I guess if you were doing something for not-for-profit, or we have community interest companies and things like that. And even if you were setting up a charity, that's a whole different structure and a whole different load of regulations and registration and things itself. So it is good to have some proper advice and go to someone who really understands what they're talking about with this.
And there's a big difference between even things like setting up a nonprofit corporation versus setting up a foundation, right? So there's different ways to get at the same end result. So get educated at first. In the beginning, that's what I preach to everyone. Talk to the right people, the professionals, and then make a good choice for what you're trying to accomplish. Start out right.
And I think, just from my personal experience, that because I started my business and I worked corporately in conjunction for a little bit, I just started off as a sole trader. And for me, that was okay. I wasn't needing to borrow any money on it.
Right.
I was testing the water to see whether my business idea was going to work, whether people were interested in what I was going to have to offer. So starting off with that low key, that I didn't have to pay for an accountant to do my books because they were simple.
Right.
I could easily do tax returns, was a really good way to be able to start off. And then it's easy to move up to be a limited company or something like that. But it's then, once you're a limited company, shifting to another is more difficult.
Right.
But you can always start off, as long as you're not taking out debts. Then you want some element of liability cover. Yeah, you're right.
Well, and if you're going to need funding, you're not going to bootstrap it. You need funding from another source. You're going to need to have that corporate veil to protect yourself. So wonderful. There it is, the basics.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. So setting up a new business is always a wonderful journey and adventure, and it sometimes can feel stressful and sometimes it can feel joyous. But there's always people out there who are around to be able to help. And it's amazing when you put that sort of vibe out, that I really like somebody to help and support me in this moment. Do you know what? These people do kind of show up. They turn up into your life. Just watch out for them. And hopefully we're part of that watching out. So keep an eye on our videos, like us, subscribe to us.
And get a copy of our new book, 8 Ways to Mind Your Own Business. Strategies and Mindset for the New Entrepreneur. All of the things that we talk about on the show, or a lot of them, are in that book. So that's a great resource for you. Get your hands on that, and then watch for, in the coming months, our new course.
Yeah, good call, Clara. You're quite right. Actually, there are some great resources out there, and our book is definitely one of them.
It's one of them. All right.
So it's been lovely sharing this time with you. Thank you for joining us, and we're super excited to see you again next week with another fantastic topic.
All right. See you next week.
Have a great week. Take care.
Bye.